In this video, we're going to walk through IRS Form 911, which is the request for taxpayer advocate service assistance. Uh, really quick before we go through this tax form, this form is not the only way that you can request the taxpayer advocate. You can actually go to the IRS website and find the taxpayer advocate service page through the IRS website, and you can call, you can submit an online request. But if you want to complete this form, you can do that as well. The taxpayer advocate serves one primary purpose for the IRS, and that's to be an advocate for taxpayers to make sure that the IRS did not take any shortcuts, followed proper procedures, and really making sure that when a taxpayer is in some sort of a financial distress, that the IRS is doing everything that it should be doing by the book to avoid putting any additional undue pressure or stress on a taxpayer's situation. I recall one of my first clients as a financial planner. We walked through a significant tax debt that they owed. It was in the six figures. It was well over $100,000, and the taxpayer advocate actually uncovered a couple of mistakes or maybe shortcuts that the revenue officer had taken to try and get my client to pay taxes, I guess, in an undue manner. So the taxpayer advocate works for the IRS, but really is an independent office. If you're in trouble, if you're in serious, urgent, dire circumstances, and you can't afford a lawyer to help you out, the taxpayer advocate is a free service, and they can at least help you with all the legal avenues to work through your tax issues. So, onto the form. There's 4 pages to this form, but really 2 pages that you'll complete to request the taxpayer advocate service. The last 2 pages of this document are instructions. So on page 1 is the taxpayer information, section 1. And then at the bottom is section 2, which is representative information. This would be completed if you've named an authorized representative to speak to the IRS on your behalf. And then section 3 would be the initiating employee information. You don't complete this part of the form. This is completed by the IRS, but we'll walk through it so you kind of understand some of the thought process that the IRS goes through when they're considering your form. So for you as the applicant, this form is pretty straightforward. Line 1, 1A, you'll enter the primary taxpayer's name as shown on the tax return. 1B, your identifying number, which could be Social Security number, could be individual tax identification number if you if you're not eligible for a Social Security number in your own right, or an employer identification number. And then 2A and 2B will be your spouse's if this is a joint return. So spouse's name, spouse's tax ID number. Line 3 is your address, starting with the street address, and 3A, city, state, and zip code. If you have a fax number, that will go into line 4. If you have an email address, that goes into line 5. If you don't have an authorized representative, then line 6 contains a point of contact, someone that the IRS can call if you don't have someone authorized in section 2. And line 7A and B, that's your daytime phone number. You'll check the block if it's a cell phone. You'll check 7B if you consent to have confidential information left on your voicemail. If you don't want confidential information about your tax issue left on your voicemail, then don't select block B, 7B. Line 8 is the best time to call, so morning, evening, afternoons. And then preferred language, if you have a language other than English that you would prefer to speak to, or if you're if you need an interpreter, then you'll enter that preference in line 9. Line 10 is the tax ID, form number. So whether it's your 1040, whether it's a quarterly statement, whatever the issue is, whatever tax form you have a concern about, you'll enter that in there. This helps the IRS identify which office and which would be able to help you out. And the tax years or periods, so you'll enter the tax years that you have that you need help with. Then blocks 12A and 12B, you're going to write in a description of the tax issue that you're experiencing and any difficulties, and then asking for the relief, describing the relief that you're asking for. Line 13, you'll sign and date. If you're talking about a joint tax return, then you'll sign and date line 14, your spouse will. If you don't have an IRS, or if you don't have an authorized representative, then you don't need to complete Section 2. But if you do, you will have already completed IRS Form 2848, which designates a representative. You'll need to attach that form on this if it's not already on file with the IRS. So you can complete both forms at the same time. And then, if you want your accountant to work things out with the taxpayer advocate, then you would enter that information here. So the name of your authorized representative in Block 1, they should have what's called a CAF number, Centralized Authorization File number. That representative should be able to give that information for you. That's a number that's unique to that person within the IRS's database. Current mailing address of your authorized representative, phone number and fax number, signature of the representative in line 7, as well as the date. In Section 3, basically, they're repeating a lot of information. They'll put in functions, operating division. All of this information is based on internal guidelines in the Internal Revenue Manual. Then they'll kind of walk through the series of functions, how whether or not this issue has met the taxpayer advocate services criteria, whether there's a congressional inquiry, whether how did this come to the taxpayer advocate's notice? So all of this is kind of for internal use, and then this is really, if 1 through 4 is checked, so whether you as a taxpayer are experiencing economic harm, facing immediate threat of adverse action, incurring significant costs, irreparable injury, or long-term adverse impact if you can't find relief. If any of those items are checked, then the advocate's office must complete this block here, and they'll usually do this with notes that they've compiled after talking with you as a taxpayer. And then, of course, they try to figure out how the taxpayer learns about the advocate service. So any of these other, 5 through 9 are maybe less immediate items, but there are observations. So if they leave you voicemails and you never respond, if you take too long, they note that. So be sure you're aware of these things as you're requesting assistance. Line 8, the employee has to complete the block that says what they did to help you resolve your issue. So that's it for the taxpayer advocate service request, IRS Form 911. You can follow the instructions down below on how to get this form to the IRS. The quickest method is through via fax. You can go to this hyperlink right here to find the fax number. You can also mail the form. If you don't receive a response within 30 days, you should call the IRS's 800 number for assistance. And if you have any other questions or need further instructions, they are detailed step by step at the back of the form. We've also written a complete article to walk you through step by step, complete with snapshots of the form itself. Feel free to go to our website, teachmepersonalfinance.com. Type in IRS Form 911 in the search bar, and this article will come up. If you have any questions, please hit us up on social or send us an email. Otherwise, look forward to talking with you the next time. Thank you.